So, have you ever been dating somebody and wondered if this is just too good to be true and felt like this person was really coming on quite strong, presenting themselves in the best way possible, and feeling like this person's kind of ticking all of your boxes? But then when it comes down to it, something feels off. And you're not exactly sure what it is, but in time, maybe you've come to see that there could be actual toxic behaviors behind the scenes with this person. So, in this video, we are going to talk about inside the mind of a narcissist. And we're going to talk about the early stage of a relationship with a narcissist overall. And we'll talk about four major components of how to recognize a narcissist in these early stages through the different love bombing characteristics that they'll use or sort of tactics that they'll use. And then some of the fostering dependency, creating addiction and reliance, and really using different fear tactics. And we'll see these all begin in the early stages of dating a narcissist. So, in this video, we will unpack these. We will dive into how to become much more aware of these things. And I think it's really important to validate that the more we can recognize these tactics ahead of time, the more we can be aware of them and protect ourselves from them and get out of these dynamics early on. And I find that the really important information here is, I think we have to recognize a narcissist is a traumatized person and they've been through their own trauma, but also we want to be sure that we're able to recognize these different red flags because narcissists can also be really, really challenging figures to be in relationships with. And unfortunately, they can do so much damage. And according to Dr. Romani, up to 10% of individuals may have subclinical narcissistic traits or have narcissistic personality disorder. And I think it's really important to realize as well that the narcissist is a master of programming your subconscious mind with different relationship tactics that can be quite abusive. And these tactics can be way more pervasive than we may even realize. So, abusive relationships are extremely common and they don't just show up romantically. They can show up in our family dynamics. They can show up in places of power. I mean, when you look at where narcissists go, one of the major characteristics of a narcissist in the DSM is that they are drawn to status and power and only really want to associate with other powerful and status oriented individuals. And so you're going to see them in positions of power in the world, in society, in your workplace, in the government. I mean, there can be so many different institutions where these individuals might be that may be affecting you indirectly. And so, what we're going to talk about are these four sort of components of how the narcissist tends to start off a relationship. And I want to be clear as well that these patterns are pervasive. So, this would be the same type of example that you would see with a boss, for example, or with a family member or with a romantic partner. They follow the same sort of pathway forward. And then we're going to talk about in these four major categories the love bombing, the dependency, the discouraging of individuation, and the using fear tactics. We're going to talk about how these things work and then what you can do. So, first and foremost, narcissists love to love bomb. And part of what's happening when a narcissist love bombs is if you look at one of the characteristics in the DSM of a narcissist, is they tend to constantly want to seek admiration and approval. And so you'll see this huge need for what is known as narcissistic supply, this sort of ongoing supply of attention, admiration, and they tend to be very grandiose. And essentially, what's happening when you first meet a narcissist is they see each relationship as an opportunity to win you over. They see each relationship as an opportunity to, like, in a sense, if you can really like them and look up to them and think they're amazing, and it's this opportunity for narcissistic supply, then it's also this opportunity for the narcissist to be able to later on exploit or manipulate or sort of take advantage of different situations, which are also major characteristics of narcissists. Now, I think it's important to realize like this isn't all conscious. They don't necessarily meet somebody and think I'm going to love bomb this person and then I'm going to exploit them and I'm going to manipulate them. It's more like they're very focused on winning that favor and winning that approval with somebody from the gates. And then once they have that subconsciously, because there's so much internal chaos for the narcissist in terms of their programming, they just naturally will destroy relationships because the internal relationship to themselves is so destructive that it's just essentially what spills out. And when we look at these different dynamics, how you'll see a narcissist really start off here is in that love bombing phase, they will really go above and beyond to win your approval. And love bombing is not, by the way, just, talking about how amazing you are and putting you on a pedestal and really pursuing or chasing your affection or admiration. It's not just that. Love bombing for a narcissist is also the narcissist talking about how great they are, and trying to win you over to put you on a pedestal back, to seem like the most powerful person or the smartest person or the most interesting person. Like they really go out of their way to be seen as this in your eyes. And so they'll really charm you in the love bombing phase. And how love bombing has been described to me from a number of different clients over the past decade is, people will say things to me like, yes, I was dating somebody and they were love bombing me, and I didn't realize it was bombing at the time, but it almost was too overwhelming for me. It was almost too much for me. And so what happens here is, while the narcissist is doing love bombing, they do these three other sort of like subcategories of love bombing. If we were to split it out, category number one is they are trying to put you on a pedestal and talk about how amazing you are, and make you feel that. A lot of words of affirmation, a lot of admiration, a lot of like really pursuing and really starting off strong in the relationship dynamic. Category number two is they also want you to see how amazing they are. And they may exaggerate their achievements, their accomplishments, who they are, as a person, their characteristics. They really play into like these charming characteristics or strong characteristics. And then number three, they're trying to, in the love bombing stage, deeply understand who you are, what your deepest needs are, what really makes you tick. And they're trying to become that, sort of like a chameleon. Like they're trying to change into that and pretend that they are those things as they're extracting that information out of you. Now, at a deep, deep level, we could actually argue that the narcissist does this because they're terrified of abandonment and they don't feel acceptable or worthy as themselves. And so they essentially have this coping mechanism where they create this big facade of who they are in order to avoid this abandonment and rejection. But we'll come back to that later. The next stage is, once there's been this attachment, once the narcissist starts to see that you are attaching to them, they actually work in the next stage of dating and relationships to slowly but surely foster dependency and reliance. And what I actually mean by this is they're trying to make sure that you are, that they are your main source for everything, for information, for love, for connection. And so they'll sometimes do this thing where they're essentially trying to wean you away from other people in your life. And they will start planting seeds in this second stage of narcissistic relationships. They'll start to plant seeds about how maybe somebody's talking behind your back, or how that person's not a good friend, or how your family isn't very loving. They don't really care about you. And they're essentially trying to, one after another, turn you away from other people in your life so they can kind of keep you more isolated. And they also will use tactics to try to foster more reliance. So they may pay for a car, for example, so that there's this sense of like, well, if you don't have the narcissist, you don't have a car, how are you going to get around? They'll do these things, and that's like one example. But maybe they'll pay for your phone, but like anything they can do to start kind of, and it's not always financial, by the way. It can be emotional reliance, right? It can be intellectual reliance. It can be like, doing things for you, like helping you with your work projects, so that you feel like you've got this like attachment to being able to lean and rely on this person, and you can't do it without them. And so there's this dynamic of trying to isolate you slowly over time. And the more this actually happens, the more they start to recognize that they do have the power over you, and the safer they actually feel when there's more reliance there, the less their wounds of abandonment are triggered. But it's then from that place that the narcissist is going to end up actually taking advantage of the situation more and more. So we have this like early stage of fostering dependency and reliance on the narcissist. But in the latter stage, right, as we go into stage three of narcissistic relationships here, you'll see, and there's many other tactics that we'll use, by the way, when we'll talk about them in this series. But in this latter stage of fostering fostering reliance, they'll also start putting you down to make you think that you can't go on without them. You can't do these things without them. It's, you have to go to them as the one source of everything. And so there will be this initial, like, win you over, all the charm, you think I'm great. Then I'm going to start like really taking up all of your time and energy and fostering the reliance and dependency that way, start isolating you from people, and then seeing what other channels, whether it's mental or physical or financial, all these different channels that they can essentially create less and less freedom for you as a person. And they'll really try to put down if you try to go and take some of your power back in any sort of way. And over time, they'll even make you doubt yourself in that relationship dynamic. So what starts off as this love bombing starts to become exactly the opposite and starts to become, harsh and cruel and constant jabs in different areas and really at a point where they feel like I've got this control. We've come this far. There's a lot of reliance and dependency. I won you over at the beginning. And now the real self of the narcissist can come out more. That sort of inner part that can be really toxic and really painful to be around. And so it's from this space, once they know that they've got more of that reliance, that they will become more cruel, more harsh, more critical. And then the fourth major component here that we'll see, and by the way, if you're seeing a lot of these different painful dynamics, and if you've come out of a narcissistic relationship, we have a whole course you can use for free. And I highly recommend going in there if this is something you're healing from, to actually reprogram some of the wounds left from a narcissist, because there can be a lot of core wounds, a lot of betrayal wounds, shame wounds, feeling not good enough or unworthy, feeling like you're shamed all the time to feel like you're bad, because anytime you challenge the narcissist, you really get put down, and also relearning boundaries. So we go through in that course and we reprogram the painful imprints left by a narcissist, and then we relearn boundaries because often they get stripped away from you. And then we go into regulating your nervous system so you can feel safer and you can stop being in this chronic kind of state of people pleasing. So, anyways, I'll put the link for that down below if you want to check it out. But as you see here, we then have the fourth major component, which is fear tactics. And fear tactics can fall in many different categories, but there will be a lot of isolating, a lot of division, like a lot of like creating an invisible enemy and then them being your savior. There's a lot of gaslighting that will take place. You'll be shamed for questioning them over and over again. You're the only one that thinks like this. Nobody thinks like you. And there's a lot of invasiveness. So we'll see a lot of like monitoring you, tracking you, invading your privacy, looking through your phone, and then pretending that what they're doing is for your own good, right? Like a lot of, oh, I'm just doing this to protect you because I know that person's a bad friend. So I'm trying to make sure that, we're aware of this. And I'm trying to see if you're texting with them because they're not good for you. Like a lot of these really, strange justifications for these different dynamics. So this will be the first video of this series, and we'll go and we'll dive into some other components of how this can work. But I think it's really important to recognize these initial components of love bombing. Like, hey, we love bomb. We make sure that we put you on a pedestal. We make you feel really, really admired and loved, and all these things you're probably yearning for since childhood, to be seen, to be protected, to be cared for. And then I make sure that you think I'm so amazing. I exaggerate my accomplishments, my achievements. And then I go into the dynamic of finding exactly what it is that you were always needing and speaking into those things and becoming that. And all of that is love bombing. If somebody is doing all of that, that's love bombing. But then what you're really going to see after the love bombing is pulling you away from other people, creating that reliance, creating that addiction, that dependency, and really discouraging you doing anything that's on your own, really losing your identity to the narcissist. And there's one thing I'll add to this too, and it's that as there's this dynamic of fostering more and more dependency there, you'll also see a lot of intermittent reinforcement, which is what gamblers get addicted to. Like if you watch, a gambler going through the slot machine and sometimes they win. And, whenever we have intermittent reinforcement, we have huge surges in dopamine, for example, which can be quite an addictive neurochemical. And then when that's taken away, we yearn for that high again. And you'll see that a lot of the time with individuals who are, in fact, narcissists, is that there's tons of intermittent reinforcement once they've passed through that love bombing stage and really started to foster that dependency. And then that intermittent reinforcement, that addictive kind of feeling, and that dynamic of, making sure that you feel criticized or punished or small or helpless, like you can't do things on your own without the narcissist. All of those fear tactics start to come into place. So be aware of these things, definitely important things to keep in mind and pay attention to. And then we'll talk about in the future parts of the series, like how to recognize some of the different dynamics of what they're doing. And then at the end, we'll talk about how to really heal from these things as well. So if you have questions about this, or if you want to share some of your relationship experiences, I'm happy to comment on them or make future videos about them as well, different questions that you might have. So please let me know in the chat down below. And then also thank you for stopping by. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you watching, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos, especially if you are able to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss any of them.